When the credits start rolling, but the movie keeps haunting you.
Before, after.
Then it's time to tune in to Dismembering Horror. We'll talk about what worked and also what didn't. We'll dissect every aspect. Maybe some of we shouldn't.
They turned out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Take it away, boys.
Hello, Tim.
Hello, Ryan.
And hello, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. Not just to Dismembering Horror, but episode 185 of Dismembering Horror, where we are here today to give you our patented dismemberment on, from 1980, The Changeling.
Did you know that this film is not the film from 2008, directed by Clint Eastwood, starring Angelina Jolie?
I should hope by now I do.
Because I also did.
Okay.
But when I told Britt that I was watching The Changeling, she's like, why?
It's just been long enough.
And then I told her it was this one, and she was like, I'm going to go in the other room. I was like, okay, whatever.
Funny.
Yeah.
Well, we'll find out if you think she missed out or not here.
We will. You're right.
All right. Well, I don't know if we got any news or catch up to do. Actually, that reminds me. I did have some catch up I wanted to do here. I had some reader mail for us.
Ooh.
So
How exciting.
One of our longtime listeners, Jesse here, sent us in his thoughts on a lot of our, was catching up on our episodes, and, gave his ratings and whatnot, gave Stream to Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, Stream to Scream 2022.
Oh, interesting.
A Rent to X. But the one, and, gave us his full thoughts on all those. But the one I wanted to share here was from a film that I thought benefited from just further analysis the most, meaning Crimes of the Future.
Oh, sure.
Which we were, even after that big, long discussion, it felt like we were still left with, well, what is that? What do we make of that even?
Yeah.
First, a thing that both did and did not work for him. Movie felt like he put Scanners, Videodrome, Naked Lunch, Crash, and Existenz into a blender, and this was the pulpy mush it all turned into. Maybe it would be appropriate to say that he stitched pieces of those movies together into a Frankenstein's monster of a film that in many ways was a pastiche of his prior work. As a huge Seberg fan, I loved this, but I also would have liked something more different, more its own thing, but in many ways, felt like his version of Scorsese's The Irishman, an elderly maestro revisiting the themes, tropes, and styles of his earlier work. Next, something interesting about the politics that I'm still trying to work out. Performance art is generally very progressive and often transgressive and subversive. And it seems like the art world that Tensor and Caprice move in embraces all those things. However, the underlying motivation of their work is inherently conservative, rejecting change, trying to keep the body the way it was, resisting evolution. So a weird juxtaposition, inconsistency there that I'm not sure was thought through very much, but that very murkiness of intention makes it all the more interesting and fits the overall tone, mood, style of the film. Which, last point, I don't disagree with Alex when he says he loves movies that can simultaneously tell a compelling story while posing deep philosophical questions and sustaining a dreamlike mood, but I'm not entirely sure that would have made this a better movie. This movie asks the audience to rethink our assumptions about art, sex, and our own bodies. It's unnerving and difficult to try and wrap our minds around the worldview of these characters, so I wonder if another thing we're also being asked to reconsider is narrative. What is story? How should it be told? Where are its essential elements? So for a movie that's this disorienting, maybe a more straightforward story would have undercut what it's trying to say. But then again, I'm with Alex and I didn't love this movie, and the ambiguous, haphazard, meandering approach to story may be why. I mean, Eastern Promises is definitely my favorite movie of his, and it might also be his most straightforward. Then he just goes on about how the things are vaginas. So, yeah.
Yeah. I don't disagree.
Yeah, always interesting when an art when art form is in its form doing the thing that it's about, yet that very form may be alienating to viewers, or the enjoyment itself. Very interesting.
Yeah. Isn't that all art?
Let's see. So Grown Ups 2, how would you apply it to that?
Like, I've seen that movie.
Okay. Well, it's a lot like Grown Ups 1, if that helps.
I haven't seen that movie either. I have a feeling that it's alienating in its own right to me.
There you go. Its form is alienating to you. Give it a chance. All right. Well, hey, okay. Thank you, Jesse, for all that, as always. But for 185 here, we got to move on because we got always a lot to discuss. Today, we're doing The Changeling, as we said. So let's just watch that trailer. Get right into it now.
All right. Let's do it.
Here we go. The Changeling.
Within this old house live two residents. One of them is John Russell, composer, professor. The other has been dead for over 70 years.
Claire, I'd like to talk to you about the house.
Did you die in this house? How did you die?
Whatever it is trying desperately to communicate. What is it in that house, Claire? What is it doing? Why is it trying to reach me? It's a hand.
Well, Tim, if you could be so kind, could you just get us all on the same page here, whether we watched the film or not, whether we did the homework or not, and tell us what was The Changeling? What happened in it?
Okay, so you've got George C. Scott. He's playing a guy named John Russell. Very plain. Thing of note, the writer, his first name is Russell, of the film. Anyway, okay, so you got John Russell, right? He's a composer out of New York, and tragically loses his daughter and wife in a kind of a freak car accident where a dump truck basically runs them over on the side of the road in the snowy mountains of somewhere. So that's bad for him and for them. And
Yes, because they're dead now.
and so he moves, I think, in an attempt to sort of move on with his life. He moves across the country to Seattle, like 4 months later or something like that. Gets a new job teaching at a university there, and is, I guess, sort of leased or like provided with an estate to live in, or agrees to lease this estate that hasn't been lived in some many number of years, 50 years or something like that. And it's big. It's a giant mansion in the Seattle sort of countryside. I don't know. Is that a thing?
The forest?
Yeah.
The woods?
Yeah. So he moves in, and he befriends the historic society woman who showed him the house initially. And he's grieving, but he's kind of, he seems like he's muddling through and trying to make a new start.
With his composing is what he does.
Exactly. And so he is working on starts working on a piece. He's inspired in the house, and weird things start happening in the house, like bangs in the middle of the morning, and doors opening and closing, and little things like that. Nice, fun haunted house stuff. And God, what happens first is he has the vision or the dream of the boy getting drowned before the seance, I believe. And that's what makes him decide to have a seance.
Well, he actually does walk in and see, or was that a dream?
Well, it's a hallucination. I'm like, yes, he is physically there in the attic.
Yeah.
Because he's following noises, and he sees it. He sees the act of this man drowning his young, 10-year-old son or something like that in a bathtub, which is pretty dark. But like, his vision is like a time warp. He's gone back in time for this event to have taken place. And that takes him on this sort of, journey of discovery of like, what the hell's going on? Is this house haunted? Who died here? Why? He has a seance. They get like EVPs in the seance. And it's this kid, Joseph, who is the son of the local rich guy family, like the family that's owned stuff in Seattle forever, prominent, and whose current senator is the son of the former guy who lived in that house. And he's like 80, right? So this is that kid presumably grew up in the house in the turn of the century, like 1900, 1900, whatever. And he finds out that there was this is, how do I describe this? It's a little convoluted. So the son, as a young boy, is disabled. And the dad, the rich dad, prominent, guy, I guess, is embarrassed by that. And also an asshole. And so, because the dad's wife, this is so convoluted. Okay, here we go. Ready? The dad's wife's father is super rich as well. And the wife dies, and the will says that because she's next of kin to the super rich guy, when her dad dies, since she's now gone, her son will inherit everything, not the dad of the kid. And he's mad about that. And so he comes up with this plan to kill his disabled son. And this is important. If his disabled son dies as well, all of the money goes to charity, not to the dad. So he's mad about this because he's a jerk. And so he kills his son, and then without anybody knowing, and then he tells everybody that he and his son are going to Switzerland to cure his son's ailments, his disability, whatever it is, which is total bullshit. Because the war breaks out, the First World War, he's given even more time to pad out this story. So he comes back 18 years later with a son that's not the original son, because he killed the original son. And that son is the now senator of Washington. So the dead son, the son that got killed and thrown down a well by his dad, is now haunting the mansion that he was killed in. Whew, we got there.
Okay.
So John Russell, our composer, he has to figure all this out, and then decides that he's going to confront the now senator, who's the replaced son, or the Changeling, and just let him know that he's not who he thinks he is, and his dad was an asshole and killed his actual son.
And then the house burns down at the end, and simultaneously the disembodied astral body of the senator, because he burns down in the house, actually has the heart attack in real life because he's accepting it all now, right? And then meanwhile, our hero George C. Scott, John, he gets out, or he's rescued by his new buddy.
He has this very intense. The house really kind of goes nutso on him in this fall apart, burn down, blow apart thing that's going on, and he's kind of wrapped up in the middle of it. And so, yeah, before the house caves in on him, his historic society friend comes and gets him.
All right. Well, great. We got there at the end. Thank you, Tim. Before we move on to what worked, we got to rate this thing. So what would you tell yourself if you had not seen this film already to avoid, stream, rent, or buy The Changeling?
Well, in my life, I have rented it. But this is, I think, the third time I've watched it, and it doesn't get better. And I think that for me is a really big indicator of like, would you spend money on it? So no. Would I watch it if it was sort of on TV, like, on a lazy Sunday? Maybe, yeah, probably. So to me, that's a stream.
Or let another 10, 15 years go by and just hope it's better again.
God,
but we'll
yeah,
have
no
this
kidding.
episode now to point to. No, I second your rating. Tell myself to stream it. Yeah, I'd seen it once or twice before. And I think it was always like, it's long enough ago. I'm like, oh yeah, well, was that good? I don't really remember. So here we are again. Didn't leave much of an impression.
And it gets so much praise for this, like, this vibe, eerie, scary thing, and the moment of the ball bouncing down the stairs, that's like, this quintessential horror moment. And I never have felt that way. And I didn't, again, feel that way.
Haunted house movies, man. They're tricky.
They're tough.
Yeah, what was it? The British set one that we weren't crazy about either. The Legend of Hell
God.
House.
Maybe that's it. Yeah. There's been a few. There was like The Innocents.
I like that one a lot.
And then there was the one with
The Uninvited.
The Uninvited. Yeah, that one, which has some cool stuff, but
I really liked both of those. The Innocents especially. I really, really liked.
yeah,
That's a buy
lots
it
of
for me.
candelabras.
Yeah. Well, we did get some good things in here though.
There's
throughout,
some good
so
stuff. No question. Let's see what we can, dismember on that.
Great.
front.
Here we go. What worked?
What worked? What worked for you? What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm, Smith.
What worked? What worked for you?
I mean, the one right off the bat, Tim, where if it's like Tim's, checkbox for a good haunted house movie, it's right up top there, is a scene where they go to the library to look at microfilm.
Microfiche, baby.
Microfiche. Right. Those things.
Wow.
So when that happened, I was like, all right, we got it. There he is looking at the thing, finding the right year, looking at the headline. Wait, go back.
Yeah. It's so funny to watch them act that out too, from like where like there's always a shot of the flipping microfiche screen. And then there's, of course, always the reverse shot of them looking at it. And so we see them. But I just was so tickled by them, like, trying to play act at, like, actually looking for something on the screen. You know what I mean? It just felt really funny to me.
So that worked for you?
It did work because it was humorous.
And was I right that you were giddy that they did that scene?
I mean, it felt very appropriate. Yes.
Well, all right. How about the other top checkbox things did we get? Where it's almost like for haunted house movies, you want to go through the formula, right?
Mm-hmm.
So next one being, and this was the standout for me, is to get out of the way, the whole movie was that seance scene.
Totally.
It's so good where they mix it up a bit, where it's not a kind I'd exactly seen a lot before with the writing. I forget there's a word for it.
Oh yeah, there is. It's like auto something, autonomic writing or something.
But basically
like
where
that.
the medium is holding a pen or pencil over a large piece of paper and just constantly scribbling, and then the messages are sort of coming through that and yes or no and or saying whatever words. The actor's performance, who playing the medium, she just brought that intensity. I really got into it and appreciated it, and it just felt real, quote unquote.
Definitely. She's like teared up like the whole time, and it felt really intense, and like I was impressed. It's called automatic writing or spirit writing.
Yeah.
And it's considered mostly bullshit. But whatever.
Yeah, but by who?
Well, skeptics.
Which, do we have to go on about that word again, Tim?
Not really.
skeptics meeting their
people who are just determined to. I'm using it in the sense of not how we feel about it, but the sense of people who are like, that's all shit.
Because if they were actual skeptics, they'd be skeptical about what they think right then,
That's
too.
right. Yeah, she was really good, and I really like that weird cone thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
like, what's that all about?
Cone thing.
I couldn't even figure it out, but it's tip tapping around on the table.
Yeah, what do the quote unquote skeptics say about that? What, and how it all kind of I think it was how the writing culminated, but it was a genuine like almost jump scare moment. It wasn't not necessarily like how it was shot or anything, how it was done, but just how the glass flew across from the table.
Looks.
Yeah.
Really unsettling.
Where it was in the wide shot and then we cut to a close-up, but something about that wide shot when it happens, we get this like the full depth and perspective of how far it's flown, and it just hits you with that kind of violence that you want when in a haunted house movie and things are being hit and thrown around. It just felt ooh.
Here's what I think is so good about what they did with that. If you're Poltergeist does this pretty well too. If you're going to have poltergeist type activity, I really think it has to operate in a way that you, the viewer, are forced to question how the filmmakers even did it. Because then you have like officially entered into unnatural, right? Like it feels unnatural. I'm like, that thing flew in a perfectly straight line, end over end, maybe 25 feet. And I'm like, how could that even happen? How do you manufacture that? And in the willing suspension of disbelief of the movie, it's like, whoa, that is way out there unnatural and really unsettling.
Like how in Poltergeist, even though we know it's a bunch of stagehands or whatever setting up all the chairs on the table off screen, it's like how quickly and how that happens.
Like, how?
Yeah.
How could they have pulled that off? Which is, I think that's, in essence, the feeling that you want to have is just the how. And that alone gives you that, that evocative feeling, that shock feeling of, and that is unsettling. It makes your sort of, your hair go up or whatever. Yeah. I think that is a really quintessential component of being successful with haunted house or any sort of, I don't know, spirit, paranormal, whatever type film.
Right. Well, and another one that I thought of for you, because I feel like these are all things you've listed before of like, what do you want from the haunted house movie or whatever, is you like the unraveling story and the mystery of it in itself. So how did that one, I assume, work for you? That was fun.
The story itself worked for me. There's an aspect of how they unravel it that doesn't work that I'll get to. But it took me forever to explain it, right? But like, that's kind of what I like about a mystery, is that there's all these kind of convolutions of this then that have to be unraveled. And, the success of that unraveling is up for grabs, depending on the storytellers. But at least in its core, fundamental aspect, I love that there's this whole thing of, okay, something's happening. The house is haunted. There's a reason. And I've said, look, it's a trope, and it's a trope now that I get kind of tired of, but like, this is 1980. So I'm okay with it in this one. When it's The Conjuring or like Insidious, it feels derivative of this. And I'm like, yeah, we know that there was a tragedy. We know that they have to go look for the body. They know there's going to be some sort of like, object that is like the thing.
Exactly. There's an object. That's the thing.
Yeah, like that's become over tropified. But in this, it doesn't really feel that. It doesn't feel like that to me in this one. In fact, there's maybe, Amityville has it too. But there's something about the era of the filmmaking that makes all that feel, it feels real, I guess, is sort of what it is. Like when they go to the house where the family is lived, the house that was built on top of the well, like that feels like a real place. That feels like a real house and real people to me. And I think that's the stuff that's really fun and exciting. Even the medium seems more kind of grounded and real. It doesn't seem hokey or tropey. So I guess that's another conversation to figure out why modern movies it often does. I feel like during the seance scene in particular, I was like, I think it was an Insidious movie that I watched. I'm like, I feel like they just redid this exact scene.
Mm-hmm.
And they might have. I only watched it the one time, but like it felt like this scene was the one that people just copied afterwards.
It's complicated, but I think the surface level or sort of easy explanation would be something's derivative when it is deriving the thing from another film versus this is all based on quote unquote true events.
Sure. Right.
So that's a big difference. And then I guess then where the line gets blurrier is like, let's say you have a film that's maybe quote unquote inspired by true events. So also has this thing that happens, yet the filmmaking itself is treating it as something we've seen before and not treating it as a fresh, original, quote unquote, realistic moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that is a really good way of encapsulating that feeling that I get with a lot of modern, in particular, haunted house stories.
Well, I wanted to tell you, Tim, I think Insidious 5 was announced.
Great.
Insidious 4 was The Last Key was, I believe, our second or third episode.
Oh my God. You know what it is? It's like the seance thing I'm thinking of must be from the latest Conjuring movie because it had the Warrens.
Yeah.
So that's Conjuring, yeah.
So,
but anyway, great. I can't wait to not go watch it.
Exactly. So as far as this film goes and that story we're talking about, the mystery afoot, a couple aspects that really worked for me about this one was the kind of, I last mentioned this, I had recommended it at some point, the Netflix series Ju-on Grudge thing, the Japanese made one. Where that as well as the thing that is the tragedy that occurred, the murder or whatever, it's dark. It's like as dark as you can get. Like, and that came through viscerally too, where you have a father murdering his child by drowning him in the upstairs bathtub in the room that he's been relegated to.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know, it's horrible and tragic, and that's why it works,
Yeah. Well, yes.
It should be, because like you think of, it would almost be insulting to just, I don't know, certain tragedies itself when looked at in this lens, even just as a metaphor, where if you just look at it as a metaphor of how hard and intense the walls are being beaten and things are being thrown around, like, have it be horrible.
Yeah, it is pretty awful. And visceral, right? Like, I'm not a big fan of the idea or feeling of drowning, since I had a couple experiences as a young kid that were really scary. And so, yeah, I was thinking, like, what an interesting way to also depict drowning a kid or anybody. This, like, holding them by the legs, thing. At first I thought, oh, well, he could just sit up. But then I'm like, wait, no, you really can't. You're really screwed in that position.
You're hogtied.
Like, what can you do? Like, you can't twist You're confined to the bathtub. There's no room for that, and the leverage just doesn't work. I was like, this is really like awful.
Yeah.
So very effective and so goddamn cruel.
Yeah.
Right? Like, of all the ways that you could, if you were psychotic and needed to kill your kid for some insane reason, this is like right up there with like top cruelty ways. I mean, I guess another way would just be to like let them wither away into nothing by neglect. But, man, I don't know. It's quite upsetting.
Which worked for you,
Great.
right?
Yes, absolutely.
The other, another thing that worked about this story for me is I loved bringing in the senator character and his connection there. There's something really fun about having, like, especially high official members of government having some sort of connection or buried past to the paranormal or supernatural that they'd rather not acknowledge than being confronted to. Like, how fun is that to have,
Right.
the stuffy, like, old senator be like, oh, I don't know what that guy was all about, getting into his plane, to then have that breakdown at the end and come full to terms of having to acknowledge this. Have an out-of-body experience himself, too. That's his
Right.
almost his ultimate undoing. I just love that. Whether it's that they're evil and in on it, or they're like victim to it. I just love it.
It actually, yeah, it doesn't matter, right? Thematically, it feels good to most of us. This notion that wealthy and powerful people often gained that power through something completely not of their own making.
Yeah.
Like, that guy is just some kid that a super rich, evil, like cruel dude, greedy, cruel dude found for his own self-serving purposes.
That you're selling your soul.
Right. And that kid, the changeling kid, the now senator, lived this entire life as the beneficiary of this stuff. And that is really, in a nutshell, what inherited wealth is. And we all sit around being like, oh, look at how successful these people who have all this money are. It's like, they're not mostly successful because they did something. They're just coincidentally the kids of people who are rich for certain reasons.
Yeah.
And often those reasons go way back into the, history of horrible things being done. So I like that that's this sort of undertoned thematic thing that's throughout this. The lead character, I'm not sure who he is as a character connects to that necessarily.
He's a successful creative pursuing his passion.
Yeah, yes, that's true. I think that is a big part of it, is that making him an artist makes him a creator out of the ether, right? Of things, and people get to subjectively decide whether or not that has value to the world. And so that's, in that sense, yes, I think that definitely works, making him that thing. But I think I'd like to explore the other aspects of who he is as a character to be the specific lead of this story later. So, but now that aside, yeah, the whole premise being swapping out your kid for personal gain is really dark.
Yeah.
And throwing dude. Obviously, this is before The Ring, right? Which to me is the movie you think of when you think of kid down a well. This is the kid down the well movie, right? Like, and I had completely forgotten that was an aspect of this movie.
Yeah, maybe we should give a little context to, and coming into this movie, all I really remembered was George C. Scott and the bouncing ball in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much. I remember the wheelchair.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing left on the list of just haunted house movies and what do we want out of them that this movie gave us. And it's just that moment or act or deal or whatever you want to call it, where you're like, you got to break open a wall or like find a hidden passage or there's like the chest behind the wall you break into and then there's the thing inside that, just all that. It was great just to have him like, well, what's back here? And break open the wall behind the closet, all that.
Definitely. There's, I think my favorite shot in the movie is right after he breaks that lock. And it's this, it's a slow follow shot of him going up the stairs. And it's just so beautiful and perfectly framed and like really eerie. But it could be a painting. I'm like surprised that it's not the poster.
Yeah.
It's so good. And then like, I didn't find myself thinking too much throughout the movie, oh, that's a really well-composed shot. Like, that wasn't a repeated thought. But that particular shot really, really stood out. And I, like, you got to appreciate, if that's the shot of the movie, great, like, I'll take that. Yeah. Like, if you can make a movie and have the one shot that like, sticks around, that is quintessential and like really like impacts you, I think you've done something right.
Yeah.
My other one thing too is kind of related to the rich guy thing, is the fact that there are like moles in the historic society, like keeping tabs and hiding files and like making sure the secret is safe. Which implies that the dude knows.
Yeah.
Right? That he knows on some level that needs to be kept a secret. Now, how much he knows, it never really gets explained. And like, I guess it's just for us to decide, because he really beats the drum of like, my father was a good man. And it's like, are you convincing yourself because you also have been telling yourself that lie your whole life? Which I'll buy that.
Yeah.
But it's right on that edge of like Rosemary's Baby vibes, where it's like there's a whole little like society of people in town that are like propping up the rich bad guys.
Wait, who was that? Because I remember he had the police guy.
The police guy for sure is connected, but I don't think the police guy necessarily knows the history. It's the historic society secretary.
Oh,
it's this older woman, I can't remember her name, that like makes the call. She's like, they're looking into you.
Okay.
And his name's John Russell, and you gotta like do something about it or else they're gonna expose you.
Yeah.
And so like I just think that's that thing of what's a good sort of, it's almost espionage-esque, you know what I mean? It's like there's this secret society, this underground, I guess it's like why people latch on to the idea of like a thing like the deep state is because it's intriguing and secretive and clandestine, and like they're like dillying in the shadows back there, like making sure things are all like corrupt and weird.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like actually, because Michael on our last episode recommended it, I ended up finishing watching Severance.
Oh, really?
Did you watch that?
I have not yet. No.
Okay. Well, just the idea, same thing applies. Secret society like this, whatever, deep state, paranormal, whatever, government people, all that stuff. It can apply to this kind of like bow down to the corporate overlordness, or even like walking around Hollywood Boulevard here, the Scientology, Church of Scientology, where it just feels like people are so desperate for some kind of just certitude or whatever. We talked about it in our cult episodes.
Yep.
And it's just kind of the thing where it's like there's so much that the ideals themselves that a lot of times are involved with them are good things, But then it's just when they cross this line into actually under our world, our common construct of our world is that you have to be on the defense by being on the offense towards other human beings.
Right.
And then there's just, I'm just trying to hone in on what that satisfying thing is. And I think it's just like when you see humans just be willing to do something at any expense because they are just so sure that they're like the good guys or they're on the side of whatever.
Yeah, you know, you're the person, I had never really heard the word certitude used in like conversation. And you're the person who kind of like used it and made me go, "Oh my God, yeah, that's the word. That's the thing." And it's a very, like, for me, is very specific thing that I, flinch at when I see it. When people exhibit that, I'm like, ugh. And like, I've been thinking a lot. I don't want to go down too much of a tangent here, but I was thinking a lot, and we've talked about this a lot, how there's this sort of cyclical nature to like when really bad sort of global tragic things happen, there's this period of time afterwards, or maybe leading out of those crazy times, of like despair seeking meaning. And you see these people, often cult leader-esque or cult of personality type people, rise up at that time. But it's always about power and certitude, and like convincing people that if they don't buy into this certitude of whatever the thing that's being sold is, they themselves will lose power. But the real scam is that what is being sold underneath all of that, the reality of the consequence of all of that is that they give over all their power to the person telling them this thing, the cult leader, who gains the power. So they're all being swindled, and that like drives me crazy because I would just want to shake them and be like, "Don't you see?" Which kind of is this movie in a way, right? Like John Russell he's not in it for gain at all. He's not trying to like the senator keeps saying like, name your price? Like, how much do you want? Like, why are you trying to blackmail me? And it's like, he doesn't have that. So maybe that's what his character really is about, right? Like he's a purist, he's a creator, and he's not in it for personal gain or power or any of these things. He's just in it for what's right, like the truth, nothing else. No gain from sharing the truth. He doesn't even say, "I'm going to tell the whole world about this." He just wants the senator to know. That's it. He's like, "I want you to know the truth about where you came from."
Right. Well, yeah, as far as determining, if you can determine something that happened historically or as an event or whatever, that is a form of certitude that we can have.
Sure, that's
I
true.
mean, you could get really philosophical and argue, no, but more or less, this murder happened this way.
Right.
So I think maybe that's then where that satisfaction comes. Same deal, where it's like, okay, we can actually have someone who's on a realistic kind of certainty, I guess, same word, certitude, battling against the guy who's not using it correctly or ideally.
So in that sense, like thematically and like the undertones or underpinnings, I guess, of this story definitely are working for me. Execution, medium at times, yeah, but not like in the way that, say, maybe The Shining, sort of just like front to back. You're like, oh my God.
We'll get to that. The Uninvited, I was reminded of that one that we watched with this, where another pretty quintessential, it's great when you can have it. If it's like the old house, is the haunted house is an old house. You want it where he goes into the room. In this case, I guess it was where the kid was being kept, where it's just covered with dust and cobwebs. Like, it's so satisfying just to have him walk into that room and then pick up the old diary or whatever it is.
The music box. I love this idea.
Yeah.
I love this idea that he was composing a song out of the ether, right? Like as you do, like that's how you. I mean, often you sit like when I write music, a lot of time I'm just fiddling around until something feels cool and like, you know, and you follow the pathway of that into, and it becomes a thing. Like that's really fun and cool that's you can just out of seemingly nothing create a thing, and then a thing exists. It's really cool. The idea that he does that and then finds a music box that is at the exact same tempo, in the same key, the exact same notes, like that's, you're like, I don't know what you do with that if that happens in real life, right? Like, I think you can't even comprehend the implication of it.
That to the point they just go, oh, it's just a coincidence. It was a famous song.
A coincidence? Yeah, like I note for note coincidentally remembered a song from the past. No way. I guess if you're a famous composer and that's like all you've ever done, and you know the history of music like front to back, okay. But dude, no way.
Right.
Like, so I think that's such a cool idea, because in his mind, he just goes, he's on my side, right? He goes, oh yeah, this can't be a coincidence. This has to mean something. And that really sets him on the journey, right? Like that, I mean, really, really is the thing that makes him go, no, I have to figure this out, because that's too much.
Yeah. And good distraction for, maybe this is part of his motivation. We see he's still, I mean, with that kind of loss that occurred, I don't think he get over it, but he could use some kind of adventure, I think, as a distraction.
Well, in a way, I guess it's sort of back to what we were just saying he really is kind of a mirror of what I was describing before. Or maybe not even a mirror. He's the same thing. He's a disillusioned person intensely searching for meaning. And instead of trying to find meaning in the loss of his family, because there isn't any, it just is a tragic thing.
He's trying to keep meaning by keeping the past alive, by that thing of wanting the past to be alive.
Yeah, and so in this case, it just happens to be this other. He's been given another piece of the past to keep alive.
So that's kind of where I was getting to with the dusty room, I wanted to say, which applies to the music box, but then also just applies to the idea of haunted old house at all. And I mean, this is the kind of thing, it's so obvious, I felt like I just needed that moment to almost just remember it again, which seeing the dusty room did. But all that, I think it's so immediately affecting and visceral, because it is that idea of thinking of an idealized past and how it's just temporary, like anything, right? So there's just something about a house in particular, or a kid's toy or room, where you can just feel immediately the sort of tender love and care and joy and attention that was put into this place, and how it almost feels, even though it's totally normal, it can't help but feel tragic when something had so much love put into it that is then just a mere dwindling, decrepit shell of its former self.
This is a really interesting idea, because at its core,
which is also what motivates ghosts to do the thing they're doing in the first place.
Right. There's a lot wrapped up in this idea, because that maybe I think we just sort of take for granted, or we implicitly understand that that's why when you see a house that's run down, there's a feeling of like, there's lots of feelings, but often I think you're creeped out, partially because, like, why is an old, run-down, overgrown, like falling apart house, why is it creepy?
Or amusement park, right?
Or exactly, or anything in the woods, or like anything that's decaying, is because it speaks to former like glory or former beauty that is now gone and like probably can't be gotten back. And I think for all of us, it's really, that's just holding up a mirror of like mortality to us, where we go, oh man, these things can be lost, like, and sort of reconsumed by time and nature or whatever. And we're part of that. And I love that that's this sort of foundational aspect of horror, because it's used all the time.
Yeah. The sort of maybe positive spiritual spin on it of is like, you know, as long as someone's alive or remembered, you know, they're just as alive, or it's just as whatever. I think that's why the ending of Titanic is so good and so affecting. You remember that it's like she remembers seeing, and it's why also just as it's the kind of thing you can do in film where it's like we think of Titanic, we set up with the old shots that we've all seen of this old decrepit thing, then just to see it in its glory days and everything is clean and new. Yeah. It's just this like joyous rush that you get from watching it. And then the ending's so good because it's like, then it's just, even after it's destroyed, they're still all there in some form that is, there's an aliveness that in some sense won't ever go away.
This is very poignant for me because my dad's parents both passed away in the last 5 or so years. And circumstantially, we never were able to have any sort of memorial. And so last week, 10 days ago, whatever, I went back to Milwaukee, and we finally had a memorial and had them interred together. They had these little carved boxes for their ashes, and they were put into basically like a mausoleum type thing. But my grandmother, Ellen, who had, I guess, requested essentially that this passage from a book that she liked be read at this time. And so my dad got up, and he's got, brothers and sisters who were there, and he was asked to read this passage. And part of the I had been thinking about since so all 4 of my grandparents died in the last 6 years, and so I was quite old to have all 4 of them alive, right? Like I think Bob died when I was 37, right? So all 4 of them were alive up until 37. So super lucky. They all lived into their 90s, for God's sake, which is crazy, right? So when he died, when he died, I didn't really know how to process it, right? Like it was the first sort of family member that I was close with to pass away. And then it was like every year/year and a half, another person died from my family, which was really intense. And through that, there came this point, especially when my mom's dad died, Chuck, I started feeling this emotion of like, I don't feel like they're gone, right? Like I understand that they are physically no longer around. Like I can't call them. But then I kept thinking, but I kind of can, right? Like I can, in my imagination, because I was close enough to them, have a conversation, right? Like I know what they'll say if I were to call them and ask them a question. I've done it so many times. So I was really comforted by this idea that they're not gone in a certain way of looking at it, because I can bridge that gap internally immediately. And that made it feel much better and okay that they were physically gone. And then my dad reads this passage that Ellen liked, and it's literally saying the same thing. And it says that one line that sort of I remember the most is, "Don't think of me as gone and unavailable. Think of me as having just stepped into the next room. I'm still here. I'm just around the corner." And I'm like, oh my God, that's so crazy to me that she was essentially attached to that exact sentiment that I was having pretty much from the point that she passed until we have this memorial the thing that I discovered for myself was also something that she had discovered in her lifetime and thought was important enough to share at her memorial.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel like I'm talking to my old grandparents all the time. I'm talking to like dead celebrities I like, where I know their voice so well.
Right.
It feels like it's funny enough. I similarly went through losing my last grandparent, or passed away a while ago, but finally had the memorial.
Yeah.
And I had a moment where it was almost maybe like with the Titanic thing, those who are still around who knew her, like just by being in the room with everyone, it was really crazy. You could feel her presence more than ever. Now, to try to tie it back to what we're talking about, though, a time stuck in a past, and how is that kept alive or not?
Right.
After the memorial, I was kind of talking with a few of my dad's old friends who'd like all known him forever. These were like, they're all getting into trouble in their 20s or whatever together, teenagers. Yeah, high school era, all that. It was really funny. But I could feel that like young version of my dad. It's more than just someone who's still with us or not. It is like what you're talking about with the haunted house thing. It's a moment captured in time that all of a sudden you can feel that version of them. I had not felt that before, but it's really interesting.
Well, so all of this is, I think, in a way to say that, like, I think there's a component to horror and in particular haunted house movies, because they so often center around this thing, like the memory of somebody or the tragedy of loss. But the plight of the main character in this one and in lots of haunted house films is to recognize and keep that memory alive in some way. And that's enough often. Like, that's very often how the movie resolves. These stories resolve by somebody saying, I recognize that you existed and that maybe something really bad happened to you. But not necessarily that, just the fact that they recognize their existence. And so in a weird way, like, I mean, this is, again, it's like why I think I like horror so much and why we even talk about this stuff is because, like, for some reason, I mean, we know the reason. Horror specifically points us in the direction of looking at our mortality and the meaning of what we do while we're alive, and the impact that has. And so when things good, bad, or neutral happen, we're not necessarily gone. We can, like, the essence of what we did in life remains and affects whether it be a house or an object or a landmark or, what nature or whatever it is. And I think getting in touch with that is just such a kind of beautiful thing. So thanks, horror.
Yeah.
You did it.
That's a great sentiment to wrap up this section on. And it sounds like we still got some stuff to talk about for what did not work. So let's get out of the way super quick. Thought the old house was cool. Classic halls and staircase. Loved the wheelchair attack at the end. Great. Bada boom. That's what I got.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, here we go. What did not work?
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
Sounds like you were saying something on his character, or...
Yeah, I mean, in a way, just us talking it out here has lessened my feelings of criticism. But, what I was feeling was like, why is this guy a affluent, older white dude the right guy for this story? If the adversary is an affluent, older white dude, why is the protagonist this sort of the same? And I know he's not the same in essence, and it's also a product of who you cast in a movie in 1980.
They were just so stoked to get George C. Scott.
I know exactly, right? Yeah, I remember reading some stuff about them being like, "Whoa, why is he agreeing to this?"
Well, our bud Roger Ebert had some interesting thoughts that I thought were apt and kind of described maybe what I was feeling during it and why I was just kind of like not totally engaged with the character all times. He said in his review of the film, if it only took craftsmanship to make a haunted house movie, The Changeling would be a great one, as all the technical requirements, beginning with the haunted house itself. The film does have some interesting ideas, but doesn't have the sneaky sense of awful things about to happen. True, but onto the character. Scott makes the hero so rational, normal, and self-possessed that we never feel he's in real danger. We go through this movie with too much confidence.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's like the best moment to me in the entire film for his character is when he's weeping in bed.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, yes. Now we get to see how the world has really like taken this strong, assertive dude down.
And he's not even to the level of strong and assertive where then that becomes the sort of fun, unique thing about him. Like, let's say Dead and Buried, where it's all about
right.
someone who's so kind of just headstrong that like he'll do whatever the immediate thing is and kind of get into trouble that way. He's not like that either, because he still is cunning enough to do the whole go to the library thing or whatever. I don't know.
You know, don't you want to see him unravel?
Yeah.
And he never really does. Like, he's always still kind of grounded.
Well, that was a weird moment. Maybe you kind of viewed it as in he was like a sort of dreamlike fugue state.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just there's a moment. It's when he sees the son being killed, the vision of it or whatever upstairs, and he just kind of looks at it and like slowly backs away towards camera. I'm like, what was that reaction just now? Like, what?
I felt that was consistent, at least. I mean, I guess that's a good thing from a choice point of view, but he was consistently not reactive to any of this. Like, I guess Ebert's right. He's too rational about it. He's kind of like, okay, well, that's happening right now. Which makes me think about what you said last episode, right?
I want to see characters like that.
Yes, but does it serve the story for it to always be, for them to be that way the whole time?
It can if it's done knowingly and is doing something with the theme or whatever.
Because like by the time he gets to like the what do you want? What do you want from me? Or whatever he says.
Yeah. I'm
like, where was this, I don't know, reaction prior? It's almost, look, he's a really incredible actor, but what he's best at is grounded realism and like, rational realism in a way. I think it'll be my recommendation, but the movie that I love him the most in, his character is just such a jerk, but he's a jerk because he is grounded in a like nihilistic sort of like, hey, that's just the world we live in.
Yeah.
And I love that, but it doesn't feel right for this movie for that to be consistent. It needs to change.
Right. And what is this section but just what we were wanting that we didn't get? But I think I was sitting down again, maybe why I always think this movie is going to be better than it is. You think, oh, George C. Scott,
right.
Haunted House movie. Just when it's sitting down at the beginning of this, I'm just like, oh, it's going to be so much fun to watch this actor unravel and start to freak and all that. But he just doesn't really.
I actually was thinking about this and I was like, okay, so if I feel like he's not really the right person to be the protagonist of this story, who would be? And I was like, well, just take who we are offered. You could have the woman who, what's her name? God damn it. Kathy, I think is her name. I'm sorry, Claire, not Kathy. Kathy was his daughter. So Claire, who runs the Historic Society, can she be the protagonist? Like, is there any way in for that? Doesn't really feel like it. Who else is suffering at the hands of this tragedy? The daughter in the house and the mother. They're real people going through a real thing and they don't know why. Now, if they were the main characters, if this was actually a haunted house about their house that's built over a well, I think I could get on board. And you can still have George C. Scott's character, right? That you can find a way to tie them together without it being needing him to be sort of. I mean, imagine that this movie starts with the mother and daughter, and they're starting to have paranormal things happen, and they're freaking out, and right before they decide enough is enough, we have to move, George C. Scott knocks on their door and is like, "Hey, I've been trying to figure this thing out. I think it's here, and I want to dig up your house." I think then you have, I would be on board with that story and have the resolution be wrapped up in his arrival taking this mother and daughter on a journey. Because if he wraps them into the mansion, you discover the stuff in their house and they get attached to the meaning of all of this as well. And they end up with him in the mansion. I think that's a possible cool angle to tell this story through. And then what you have is two people who are clearly not well off, living in a small house that was built by super rich people to cover up a thing as your protagonists, and the other side of the coin is the rich guys. Like, the bad guys then are diametrically opposed to those characters. They're on separate ends of the spectrum. So I could get behind that, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Sure. Yeah, I can see that. I just think it's more to do with his character traits being muddled. And it's weird because you want a character to have contradictory traits, for them to always be surprising you with what they do next and all that. But just something about it where it's earlier you were just asking, well, what kind of, does that work to have a character who's what's the word you use? Not scientific, but
rational.
Yeah, the ultimate, the ones who's a super kind of rational and cold towards us all. That is usually in a haunted house movie. That's usually one of the characters you have. And then you have the scientist character, right? Who's approaching the paranormal, this is the science of it all, whatever. Everything is unknown till it's known. And but then with those characters, it becomes a fun thing of, well, then what is their breaking point in the end, almost. And he's not never pushed quite that far to be that person. And then he has these other contradictory traits of just, I don't know. It's just all just kind of weird and kind of just adds up just towards kind of, at least was my experience watching it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, let's say you keep him as the protagonist and whatever, that's fine. But at a certain point, if his character is predicated, where his headspace is predicated on the tragic loss of his wife and daughter in particular, we never really, his character never comes around to have to face that. It's sort of vaguely underneath because he's trying to find justice for another young child who died. But the only connection to his daughter in that sense is the lie that the dad told the newspapers or something like that the kid was run over by a coal cart. Or I don't know, that's not even that was some other kid. I don't even remember.
It was the first lead that they thought it was.
Yeah, exactly. So that's not enough. I would rather see I don't know how you do this exactly, but if the haunting is capable of showing him the tragedy of Joseph, the kid who was actually killed. I would almost want that, the magic of that, to be able to show him his daughter to spur things on. And I mean, it's almost sort of there with the ball, kinda. But I just never felt like we got that thing of him having to face that, and that helps him figure it out.
Right. Yeah. His past and what he's going through just kind of goes away.
Right.
Yeah.
Boo. Bummer. Boring.
Some other things didn't quite gel for me. I thought there were some weird pacing things, not in like the so much grander scheme, but kind of almost in an inner scene or slightly scene to scene way, where like towards the beginning, I think it's after the first night of pounding, it's like another spooky scene happens immediately after, and it just they kind of just cancel each other out in a weird way. Or even just like in a pacing in the end where it's like you have that final tag where the house is burned down and the music box starts going again. Like just the way we come into that end tag and almost how quickly it happens. It's like there's no atmosphere or eeriness or mystery. It's just kind of like, there it is, and then it happens. I don't know. It was weird. There's just stuff like that throughout the movie that just all felt like it was just not finessed. And maybe that's kind of what Ebert was getting at too, or an aspect of it, of it doesn't have that sneaky sense of awful things about to happen. I could see just kind of weird pacing issues affecting that.
This is an editing issue. I thought this throughout. They cut to the next scene too quickly a bunch of times. Like something really eerie has just happened, and before you can even let it sink in, they're just cutting into the next scene. And often that next scene is already kind of like in process. So like I can't remember exactly, but it's like the moment that he sees the kid in the bathtub or something like that, and he kind of steps back, and then it's like hard cut to the next day where he's like walking along talking to somebody on the campus of the college, and you're like, ah, like what? I think for all of the eerie kind of house shots that do exist in this movie, they could have utilized more space between getting to the next scene when a thing actually is happening. Because it's just like hard cuts into some other like day. And I'd say I noticed it at least 3 or 4 times where I was like jarred by it. And I'm like, oh man, no, like sit on this because that's the creep factor right there.
All right, so not just me then.
No, definitely not.
Other little things I felt like were just missed opportunities or just wasn't as creepy as I would have liked. Something I always say a lot with a lot of films almost where it's the soundtrack kind of is just too much or kills the moment. Like I love that little sequence where he gets rid of the ball, throwing it off the river or the bridge or whatever, and gets back, and of course the ball comes bouncing down the stairs. But when it does, the music says boom, ba-da-da, da-da-da, there it is, the ball coming down the stairs.
Oh yeah.
And just to think of it just happens just on its own, just there it is. That's what's eerie for me. I don't know, it's not into that style.
There's a major aspect of sound design that doesn't work for me in this. And I was like, initially, I couldn't figure out why. I was like, what is wrong with this? It doesn't feel right. What I believe it to be is the sound design drops out the actual room tone and, sound that would be occurring in real time. When there are the scary sounds happening. So for example, the first and second time he hears the pounding in the walls, the only soundtrack that's actually happening during that is the sound effect of the pounding. There's no room noise. And then when it's finished, and he's getting up, he's wandering around, you would hear him breathing, walking, like this, just the sound of the house also would exist in reality, but it doesn't. And I think that that's actually a humongous mistake because it makes it just feel like a sound effect. It doesn't feel like it's real in the moment. It feels like it's a soundtrack, like that it's detached from what's happening in the moment. And I hate that. That doesn't work for me at all.
I could describe just like that the same way. It really bugged me, the voice of the little boy when it was on the ESP thing, or what did you call that? EVP?
Yeah.
Where it's like, yeah, I don't know. You think how creepy and eerie it'd be. You want to make it against how quote unquote real, where it's like he really has to turn up the volume. And it's this sort of maybe like it can just barely make it out. Like, Tim. You know, whatever. It's like super slight. But here it was just like a little boy voice going like, "Hello, I'm a little boy. Hello." It's just, this is so much.
Yeah.
Not into it.
Yeah. I bet you, if you, man, this is surely true of many, many movies. But if you redid all of the sound, if you remastered this and you had a Foley artist come in and like redo a lot of that stuff, I think the movie would be way better.
Yeah. Or it's kind of, you know, when or just in this terms of soundtracks too. Like I rewatched one that we had reviewed because it was on the Joe Bobathon thing. I watched The Stepfather, which I think it's a lot of fun and really enjoyed. But it's just another example where it's like, wow, his crazy, intense, super affecting performance just gets totally undermined. If you're someone like me who's distracted by it, of just this kind of like, I don't know, soundtrack that wasn't too crazy about. Anyways.
Yeah.
Sound, music.
I mean, in a horror film, kind of really important.
Yeah.
Not that it's not important in other films, but it really can make or break the vibe that you're going for.
Yeah. And maybe this is to just all these reasons we're mentioning is why it didn't work for me. After he's playing the piano towards the beginning and the key doesn't work and he steps away and then we just move in on the piano and the key plays itself loudly. That just for me in that moment felt way too much too soon. Like it could have just been hanging on the key and just left us to go, well, that's weird. Why isn't it working? Was someone playing it that much?
Or just have it move just the tiniest bit and be like, wait, did that just move?
Sure. Just, I don't know. Is this too much too soon? But at the same time, how quickly then we get to just things pounding like it's almost no big deal. Maybe it was fine to come in. I don't know. Just felt weird.
Yeah. There's an art to this slow burn, and this one, it feels chopped up.
I mean, you look at the other extreme would be the Innkeepers.
Well, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So this one was, one extreme. That one's the other. Great. That's all I had.
Yeah. Did I have anything really specific? Not really, I guess. I'm trying to let's rack my brain for something. I almost could say it didn't work for me, but there are if the sound design was different and the soundtrack or the score was better, this would work for me. But because it's not, the lengthy periods of time in this movie with no dialogue just feel like not a whole lot's happening. But I can see how the attempt makes sense to me. Like, you don't need a lot of dialogue in this story. So I'm cool with that. But bridging those periods of time with the appropriate sound design didn't work out.
Yeah, a lot of just walking around looking at things. It's a little too quiet.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Our next or last big section here, things of note.
Things of note!
This should be interesting.
Well, one thing I think that's interesting is just how, I don't know if prolific's the right word, but how much this director worked. His name's Peter Medak. And he's got stuff starting in 1968 all the way to 2018.
And he did an episode of Masters of Horror, which I'm watching through right now. So I'll keep an eye out for his episode.
Oh, yeah. There it is. Interesting.
So in Peter's defense, too, all this that wasn't really working for us, we were touching on, got to wonder how much it is him or just kind of the circumstances of the project.
Totally.
Where, I believe this is from the Wikipedia or go-to here. He was the third director hired for the project. His predecessors, Donald Cammell and Tony Richardson, both withdrew due to, quote, creative differences. Then Medak was hired with only a month to facilitate script rewrites and set construction.
Oh, my God. Wait, creative differences between who?
I'm assuming each of those previous two directors and...
Producers?
The producers or studio, yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine it would be between them and George C. Scott.
Or the screenwriter. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, that's possible, sure.
So
wait, who was the screenwriter again? Oh, yeah, William Gray and Diana Maddox.
And so Russell Hunter, now he's the dude who has the account that this film was based on. And so pretty close to actually what he says happened. So apparently a lot of his story... There's like no way to confirm, this person actually did live at this house, whatever. But what he says happened, and this is a big one in this the lore of the paranormal world. So he moved to Colorado, help his parents out, run a lodge, and no one else wanted this mansion, which apparently might have had something to do with it was built on top of a cemetery where the bodies were haphazardly moved. Okay. And I'm sort of taking the summary from the website mysteriousuniverse.org from a 2019 post. So just like in the movie, intense banging would happen at 6 a.m. every morning. Paintings would fall off, move, that kind of thing, getting really intense. He found a hidden staircase leading up to the attic where he found a journal of a boy who was trapped there. And it was just more or less the same story of he's killed, false adoption, or he falls, the kid to replace that kid, all that stuff. That's where the ball came from rather than the music box. It was a toy ball that he found of the kids. And same deal where he then through Medium or whatever tracked down like the actual grave site or the burial site, the hidden burial of this kid, and thought that would have helped things get put to rest, but things only got more intense so that's when Russell Hunter called in a church to give it their once over. That apparently helped, but then not entirely. So he just, finally decided to move out and the house was destroyed. But apparently when it was getting demolished, the bulldozer operator was crushed when he was destroying what was the main bedroom. The walls flung out in such a way where they flew outward and killed him.
Spooky.
Yeah. You have anything else?
No, not really. The only thing I forgot to mention, I guess, in what worked is the gold medallion being drawn out of the dirt in the well. I just really liked how that looked.
Oh, yeah. That was neat.
It was cool. But no, I don't really have anything of note.
Great. Then we can wind down as we like to do with some recommendations. I'll recommend Dead quick here. I was interested, the filmmaker Juzo Itami, who made that film Tampopo. That's really great. I always been recommending that to people. It's like, what else has he got going on? And they had a full collection of his films from Criterion Collection or channel. And I watched The Funeral, one of his early ones, and it was right up there. It was really great. I recommend The Funeral. Recommend Dead, The Funeral by Juzo Itami.
Sounds great. I'm going to recommend Dead, my favorite, and one of my favorite movies, but my favorite George C. Scott movie, which is what I was referencing earlier, The Hustler, which is Paul Newman and Piper Laurie and Jackie Gleason. And it's like from, I don't know, 58 or something like that. And it's about a pool player, hustler. And George C. Scott plays sort of the like manager, I guess, in a way, of these pool sharks. One in particular. And he's so ruthless and like conniving and realistic. His character is like a villain in it for sure. And he is everybody in that movie is amazing. It's amazingly shot and directed, but he is by far a standout. Like that was my introduction to him as a actor, and I was like, oh my God.
I haven't seen it. I just added it to my list.
Oh, it's so good. I have the DVD. I will hand it to you momentarily.
I'll recommend to you, just as far as George C. Scott films, have you seen Hardcore?
I don't think so, no.
I remember it being really great, but it's where he's like conservative dad whose daughter like runs away to go into porn, and he goes on a hunt to get her back in like the seedy area of San Francisco. It's great.
Whoa.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Hardcore. Cool. All right. Well, that's it for George C. Scott, because that's it for today's episode.
That is about it.
All right. Well, in closing, maybe check out the house before you buy thoroughly enough. Get that paranormal investigator in there. Thanks for listening.
That's right. And we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.